something that I told you last week as we go through the story of this young man by the name of Joseph. And that's that if Joseph had stayed in the house of Potiphar, he would have been a prisoner for all of his days. But God had another plan. And even though he's gone from living in the comforts of Potiphar's household to a prison, God's still working in his life and preparing him for that which is to come, which will be an awesome responsibility. But by that time, he will have been well equipped because of his learning of management skills and learning how to deal with inventory, all of those things that he had to do in Potiphar's house and in the prison, because the scripture says that he literally was given the keys to the prison. And responsibility was just laid upon him by Potiphar. So now we go back to this thing about the dreams. And as we said, Joseph had these dreams early in his life when he was 17 years of age. He's lived some life now. He's not necessarily a young man anymore. And he's there in the prison, in the king's prison, and these two other prisoners are brought in, and they're there with him in the same cell or vicinity that Joseph is living. And they are people who, let's say, had the relationship of somewhat with Pharaoh himself. And now they had some trouble. And now they're in prison. And they both had a dream on the same night at the same time. And Scripture tells us that when Joseph came into the room where they were, he saw that they were sad. And he said to them, he says, "Why are you sad? What's going on here?" And they began to tell him that we've had these rather bizarre dreams, and we don't have anybody who can interpret them. And Joseph said something I think is very profound. And he said, "Does not interpretations belong to God?" Well, if you think about it, that's sort of logical, because if indeed they are dreams from God, then God would certainly know how to interpret them. He knows what they're all about. But let's look at something else just for a second here, as we've talked about the comparison between the dreams and the visions. The thing about a vision is that it'll also often happen in an instant, very short period of time. And you'll get a glimpse of things. And there's generally some clarity that goes with it. But a dream, because you're in a kind of a comatose, unconscious state, and all of your defenses are down for God to bring revelation to you. Oftentimes when you awaken, then you're not clear as to what it is God's saying to you. Oftentimes God will give you, the dreamer, the interpretation. I've had that happen to where I had the dream, woke up, and then God would speak to me and give me the interpretation of the dream. But in this case, it required someone else, and that someone else was Joseph. And he told them the interpretation of the dreams, and we'll talk about that tomorrow. It's Pastor Jack King with the Gospel, the radio broadcast.